welcome back to another LFG Thursday. Today, I am happy to be joined by Maud from Alefium. Full disclosure, I've had sick kids, haven't got a lot of sleep, so this is going to be really fun. I took a bunch of coffee to get some energy in here, and so I'm a little bit amped up right now. And the interesting thing is like right now with everything going on, we've got Bitcoin going on, we've got altcoins going on, we've got all sorts of activity out there right now. So this is like the perfect time for us to bring other projects to our community. A lot of people already know Alefium, and share in what we've got. And my whole theme has been winning together. So without further ado, Maud, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure, of course. So my name is Maud. I work for Alefium, and at Alefium I'm responsible for what we call operation, which is basically everything except development and marketing, even though I do give my input on marketing from time to time, but pretty much oversee everything else.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. So we've had guests on here. Dan from Fluxy is always amazing to meet with, and a lot of the people I know Dan too, and they follow him. And Kevin from Coin Metro was amazing. Like Kevin's such a good speaker, and so for me, this is like a continuation of. It's really fun being able to bring people in from outside the community that I usually interact with, and kind of just figure out what's going on in the broader space. I'm a huge fan of proof of work, and I guess the first thing I like to just dive right into this. This is an open conversation. You're welcome to derail me any which way you want. I'm happy to do that. And for me, what is operating on proof of work mean to you? Maybe even versus POS, in case that doesn't bother you. But I always like to ask that. We're proof of work chains. What does that mean to Alefium? What does that mean to you? It's all you.
Yes. Sure. Sorry. Do you want to finish, or I can jump in?
No. Go ahead.
Sorry. So really, like, proof of work was a given when choosing where to build Alefium, so to speak. Proof of work remains the most decentralized and the more robust consensus algorithm to ensure decentralization. We've seen a lot of projects in the pursuit of scalability to really move away from proof of work, following suit with Ethereum. And I think it's a shame because for a long time, I think proof of work has been a bit misunderstood, with the arrival maybe of a different kind of audience within the crypto space. But we really believe that proof of work is the way to go. It's also been the one that's been tested through times the most. And I think, decentralization was the key driver behind Bitcoin and blockchain in general. And I think staying true to this is a core principle that is worth preserving. So yeah.
So on that note, right? Is there any? You don't have to love proof of stake or hate proof of stake. I think all of these things can coexist, right? And so,
this is the thing, is like you need options. And if you look at smart contract enabled chain on proof of work, there are so little of us, and it's important to have variety. Sorry, it's only Thursday. It feels like a Friday night. That is also a super long day. But what I mean is, like, the industry will really mature when you have several options that suits different needs, different principle, different conviction. And especially when it comes to smart contract enabled blockchain, there are so little of us into proof of work that gives us depending on when you look at it, it's actually a great opportunity and a great differentiator compared to the broader smart contract enabled chain industry, which are majoritarily on proof of stake. And I think that where people might have seen this as an odd choice, with the change of perception around proof of work, it would show that it was actually a good move.
Yeah, you would have most of the guests who join this would agree with you. And I'm not like a proof of work maxi. I do tend to only build and interact with proof of work networks. I think what's interesting, and this is where I'll kind of take this question is, uh, if if Alephium is proof of work, it's an L1 obviously. Um, I'm curious if there's ever an opportunity for the chain to adopt something like a hybrid L2 or ZK, something that might actually use a POS type consensus that doesn't make sense to also mine. I'm curious. I don't know anything specifically, but if that was ever an option, and if that's some direction you guys would look at, if you even need to.
So just to say, I'm also not against proof of stake. I think it's really about different solution for different needs and different, again, conviction. And so it is definitely possible to build L2 on Alephium. There are some primitives that would need to be added, but I think some of them are planned, like ZK, specifically planned for the next network upgrade. So for typically use cases where you would want maybe the speed of finality that proof of stake can offer you, that might make sense to then have layer twos that would focus on this. That could be application specific or kind of area specific or use case specific. But for us, really, the super important part was to have a solid layer one, because we don't really believe as layer two for scalability. You know what I mean? It's like layers have a purpose, but for us, they make sense if you have a solid foundation. Like it's not a solution to flaws. It shouldn't be used as a solution to maybe some flaws in the design of the L1. It can, but our vision is more that it augments maybe augment what the layer one already provides you.
Yeah, and I agree. I totally agree. I was more fishing to see if you guys had anything active going on. It was just a roundabout way to fish for an answer on that. So you'll have to bear with me. I'm very familiar with the architecture of Alephium and things like that. I don't want to presume anything. One of the things that I thought was really cool recently was adding the way that the groups interact, and I'll have a follow up for that. But I don't know if you want to talk about like what was the challenge, why did you guys solve it the way you did, and what do you kind of view that as going forward? How is that going to help the ecosystem?
You mean about
Kind of
in
obfuscating the groups because
yeah.
yeah, because you guys have the multiple groups and things like that.
Yeah, so we also use sharding like Cadena, but we do it a little bit, it's a little bit different for us than it is for Cadena, because Cadena is account based. So in your so what is split between the multiple chain is the accounts. Because we are more within the UTXO based family, or what is split in different chain is actually transaction. So transaction are assigned to specific chain, but we don't actually have we don't split the group. So transaction, no matter what, they are on chain. So we don't have to deal with the complexity of cross-chain transaction, which often with account-based sharded chain is where the major, I would say, challenge comes off, is when how do you manage those cross-chain transaction? So because we are on the UTXO model, we don't have that. All transactions are on chain, but at the smart contract level, so the way our architecture work is that address are assigned a group, and basically transaction are assigned to a specific chain depending on the address, the group of the origin address and the group of the destination address. And smart contract are also group specific. So where the state of smart contract is not shared between group, so you have a little bit of friction. And I think for us in the choice of sharding and where that was the most painful point, let's say challenge, wasn't at the transaction level, because in our case that's kind of single chain experience. It's really on the smart contract, and it basically required users to have addresses in multiple group, because since smart contract are group specific, you need to have an address in this group to interact with it. There's less group than there is chains. But and so now, please don't ask me the technical details, but so that was a bit the challenge, which was already somewhat addressed, because with the same seed, wallet will automatically generate, for example, an address in the right group. It's the same seed, so you don't have to manage multiple seed. It's just you have to generate a separate address and kind of move funds from an address to another. And that part was not automated. But as you know, even this is already probably too much for the broader retail. And Chain came up with the design where you would have an address that would actually be compatible, that could exist in all of the groups. So you abstract for the end users the complexity of group. Your address works everywhere. Your funds are centralized into this address, so you don't have at all to manage the group or even know they exist. There would still be a limitation that should be, that can and probably eventually will be addressed differently, which is for smart contracts in different groups to talk together. You need a way, depending on the design, you can maybe use tokens as a way to transfer property, or you need, or maybe here I'm saying something technically wrong, but you would need a way for contract in different groups to communicate. You can do it with tokens, but that works only for specific use cases. So we still have, even though we're making progress into completely removing this challenge, I would say it's still, still steps to go. And
Yeah, no, absolutely. And here's the thing. I love to explain this. So I think if everybody looks at it like, oh, there's a challenge, oh, there's a UX problem here, in all of the chains that took a non-single chain approach, right? It doesn't matter if it's groups or multiple chains. I didn't even know account structures, if that even matters. What we're doing is we're pushing the needle forward. We're trying to make an impact. We're trying to change things. So yes, as you said, and I'm kind of aware of the group setup. Ron had come on, I think last week, and we kind of tested out his app, and I had a problem because he had sent me funds, but I was on the wrong group, and I'm like, what do we do here? And it reminds me that, like, even though, like, once you get that sorted, it's like flawless. It's a really good user experience from there. But even those little things, it's just interesting from a user perspective. I think the most important thing there that I picked up on was that you're not worried about the technical so much. You're worried about, like, what does that look like for the consumers at the end of the day? Because that's really all that matters. And that's obviously where all of us want to be. So. That's
yeah,
good.
and I think people underestimate, like, even with more mature chain that have existed for longer, is like there's still so much progress to make it truly user friendly. Because where people underestimate, for example, the impact of some of EVM design choice in the user experience, it's maybe not as noticeable at first glance from the group, but it can be a lot more dramatic, especially when it comes to asset management. There's a lot of user experience things, like, I don't know, about, like, of course, sorry, but this approval mechanism that you have on EVM chain, where before you can interact with a contract, you have to allow that contract to access some funds into your wallet. So it's a two-step process. You pay transaction fee twice, which, depending on which chain you are, they can be painful to pay like $15 or more just to give an approval. And so people tend, either some contract will ask you unlimited access to a specific asset, or user will just make it unlimited so they don't have to do this process over time. And they don't know that can be, if it's not revoked, that is true, whether or not you're actually interacting with the contract. And if you want to revoke this approval, you need to find like a third-party website. So many chance to have, to be phishing attack or something like this, to connect your wallet, look at your approval, revoke them again. And so they are, UI and UX challenges that are there that maybe people don't feel at first glance, but the effect are, in the end, for the user, way more dramatic than, struggling a little bit to figure out the group.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a lot more innovation that needs to go in the space. And it's what you said about moving the needle is so important. It's like there's so much more to be done in the space, and we need people who, don't just copy paste what others are doing, but taking the things from others, getting inspired from the good solutions, and trying to bring something additional to even go a step further. And I think, Cadena is definitely, when it comes to sharding, you guys are a pioneer. You've really done amazing work on the sharding front, amongst many other things.
Yeah, the one thing that is still elusive, and I think this is back to my point. The one thing that's still elusive is the user experience, right? When you start dealing with the multiple chains, it's interesting. There are ways to kind of trick it, but at the end of the day, it is one of those challenges, and I think it's okay to admit, where you're like hitting the mark and where we still need to improve. And I think there's so much attention to those things that they will get sorted out. But you have to be careful too. You can't just you're running a public ledger that has to be available 27. You can't just change something and hope it works.
Exactly. I think so. It's this, is that you have to continue to innovate, but you have to do it in a way that is, thought through. It's like you cannot just introduce change, because it's always a lot more complex than people imagine. And I also think that I wanted to say something and I forgot. There was something else. I wanted to say also, the space is moving so fast that I think it's important to recognize that even if you had the perfect solution at a certain point in time, that space moves so fast that 1-2 years later, your solution might be obsolete. So it's also, at least this is a principle that we apply. We try to find the right balance between, looking at what has been tested, tried, true, but and taking the time, like always questioning what we have chosen and trying to improve, but also being conservative into the changes we introduce, because you have to evolve to continue to improve and stay, and even not improve sometimes, just to stay relevant and competitive in the industry that you are. So I don't think, especially software in general, actually, not just blockchain, it's important, to continue to evolve. I think when I used to work in another software company that was not blockchain related, I don't know who told me that. I don't even know if that's true, but that typically software code base tend to be completely new every 2 years, because you do a little change there, a little change there, and it's something that constantly evolve. So
I think it's like at this point it's like every 6 months. So if you go back and if I go back and I look at my code, right, and I look at it, something I did like 6 months ago, what I'll find is I can make it more efficient, just because over time we're figuring out new ways to do the same thing, and we're finding out more efficient ways to do it. We're finding more optimal memory, and that's actually kind of leads me into. So I'm not gonna try to get you to go too deep on technical stuff here today. But I was gonna ask you more like a broad question for developers, right? And I think this is so important, right? You've got your own custom smart contract language, which is Ralph, right? It's Rust based. So when the decision was made to create your own, again, not cookie cutter, right? To make your own smart contract language that resides on Alephium, what kind of went into that thought process? And have you felt that it gave you a leg up with developers, or has it been, kind of tricky to get people to come in and try things that are not Solidity?
So I just want to clarify, right? I'm not the dev, so here I am retranscribing the thoughts of the founder, but he can give a bit more details. But basically, the first step was we wanted to have our own virtual machine. We wanted to, and anyway needed to, because we have our own accounting model, which is a little bit closer to UTXO, but does have stateful. It's called stateful UTXO because the contract has state. So it also has some elements, the state element of account base. So anyway, we needed our own virtual machine because we couldn't just take EVM. And anyway, we didn't really want to. And I think it was the same with Solidity. Solidity right now, because it is the most used language, people tend to think of it as Solidity having a good user experience instead of it being the most adopted. So it's the easiest maybe to pick up because you have the most resources, you have the most example, but actually it's a pretty complicated language in the sense that it's so easy to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know, it is really, really hard to protect yourself against certain attack vector. And so it's not as developer friendly as you would think by the fact that it is the most used. You have to remember it's the first one. So you
Mm-hmm.
obviously have the first mover advantage, but it doesn't mean it's perfect. And so the decision was really to build a security was always at the utmost importance to the founder. And he wanted to create a language that was, maybe it's not the right way to describe it, but smaller in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
smaller, where you didn't have 10 different ways to do the same thing. So you can really reduce the surface of error, and you make it easier for people to build things securely. It's it's not means that you cannot make mistake, or that you cannot write code that is not secure, but you make it harder for people, less easy than it is in Solidity. And so that was really a fundamental principle in every aspect of Alefium's design, no matter if it was the virtual machine, the smart contract language. And it started quite small in terms of functionalities. Same thing is that before developing a full-fledged language that have everything, we
Mm-hmm.
wanted to take the time of starting small and evolving the language as use cases came along. Because if you develop without knowing how people use it, sometimes you make choices that you might regret in the future, and you might not be able to change them anymore. And so we wanted to talk a little bit more of a pragmatic approach. Yeah. And I see a question about half. I will copy it, and I will ask to the person that can answer this question.
I'm
So
guessing it's Turing complete.
yeah, I want to
It would
see,
make sense. Yeah.
but I'm not sure what makes a language Turing complete or not. So I will ask to someone that can give me the actual
They'll
correct.
tell you it's Turing complete. It's a Turing complete language. And what's interesting. So the easiest way I always explain it is if you can loop through things and continue. So what that why I believe Pact, for example, and we don't need to spend a lot of time. The point is to open this up and get more knowledge about the broader system. But the reason there is, so if you make a mistake in your contract, you can't accidentally continue running a function, drain somebody's funds. That's, to me, I think that's the big reason that it was chosen to be Turing incomplete. I'm sure Stuart would have a plethora of better things to say about it. But at the surface level, I think if you're just asking like a quick question, yeah, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with Turing complete. I think it's interesting, and we all know as developers, we all know Solidity is great because it's so well documented. There's so many examples, but
Exactly.
you can get owned so fast. Even I know what I'm doing, and I'm terrified sometimes to write stuff in Solidity
And
just
you
because.
see,
Yeah.
yeah. I wanted to say, and you see more and more people not opening their code base because they're
Mm-hmm.
worried that
Mm-hmm.
the cost of audit is insane. I've heard of projects spending more in audit than they actually spend in development costs. Not saying audit are not necessary, but it's like, it's just in terms of priority, you spend a lot more time worrying about, is my code secure, than time you spend actually coding and innovating. And you should always, of course, worry about your code being secure. Security is at utmost important. Solidity makes it such a huge task to actually make sure your code is secure.
Yeah, and Fudo went the more technical route. Yes, of course, and yeah, and so I think we can if there's anything else you want to like talk about from the chain itself, any of the technology choices. Otherwise, I've got like more fun questions that I think will be interesting to figure out like what the long term goal here is, and kind of start from where you started and
I'm
go
happy to
there.
be your lead is like,
All right.
you can, I told you when we spoke about this space
Yeah.
before, I didn't
Yeah.
want to see the question in advance.
Yeah.
You can ask me literally anything,
Okay.
and I mean that. And I will, I'm fine answering, um, or just telling you I'm not fine answering,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
you
Of
ask.
course.
Feel free to just really genuinely please ask me anything.
All right, then we'll dive into the fun part then. So I like to give an introduction to begin. Our user count kind of like by so I'm Central Time, so like by 12:30 we start to peak, and then it starts to go up from there. So it's kind of cool. So you can kind of like anything that's like more on message, that would be something you want to communicate. Anything in the last half to the last 15 minutes, like target that time. Just a little tidbit, you'll get the most coverage on it. So one of the things I think we all know, and I kind of brought it up at the beginning, is Bitcoin, right? Without Bitcoin, we would have nothing. Like even if there was another solution, even if there was something before Bitcoin, which I think there's arguments all over the place of like back in the 90s and 80s we had this basically developed. And so Bitcoin broke 100,000. That is a huge deal. I've not stayed up waiting for that to happen. I just knew it was going to happen, right? Because I follow the markets over time, and just like 100,000 hit, I think 250,000 will hit at some point. Just the way it works, right? It'll just slowly get there. And what does that mean for crypto adoption, and what does that mean for chains like not just Alephium, but like considered altcoins? But what does that mean for the broader ecosystem, and especially Alephium in this case?
I mean, what I can tell you, it means to me is that I had a friend who said he would not shave until Bitcoin hit 100,000, and he gave up. He gave up like 6 months ago. He actually works for LFG as well. He gave up 6 months ago, and he should have waited because he got there. But he had been like almost a year. He had not shaved. Like it was time.
Yeah.
But it was time. But I think it was such. If you see the way people have looked at Bitcoin, I think there's so many examples of this on Twitter of people looking at changing their mind on Bitcoin. You see what the same people were saying about Bitcoin, 5 years ago, 9 years ago, 2 years ago, and what they say now. So I think, it demonstrates resilience, because a lot, if you go into the broader, outside a little bit of the crypto bubble, people call it a crypto bubble, right? But the more cycle Bitcoin stays on, it kind of really paved the way to showing people like it's not a bubble, it's not a fade. I mean, there's some bubble element in the space, right? But it's not a fade. It's not something that's going to go away. It's something that is there to stay, and every time, every cycle, it comes back stronger. So I think this is a strong message just for the space as a whole, because obviously, like you said, Bitcoin is the first, and obviously this is where the spotlight is, but it's a huge validation for the entire space, that this technology is relevant. Sorry, I'm laughing because Ron is asking me for my dog name.
They're probably going to make a meme coin of your dog. Just be careful.
I told him the name and sent him the picture, but so he knows. But anyway,
then that's what's going to happen.
But anyway, so I think it means a lot. And then more specifically for Alephium, but I also think for Cadena and any proof of work chain, it shows again that proof of work is a good choice. It's a valid choice, and it's been consistently through time as well. And I think this is not linked to Bitcoin hitting 100,000 per se, but you also see a lot of change of perception in the sustainability industry. Like Bitcoin and mining was diabolized last cycle. Like it was a big thing, and I think perception around this is changing a little bit, because I see more and more people looking at mining, proof of work, and mining in general that can actually be a very efficient way to help deploy sustainable grids, because it helps you dimension it and finance it, basically. So not to say like I had a big discussion with someone in our team actually of this, not saying like mining in itself is green and it's and like this, but actually can contribute to supporting better sustainable practices by the way it works. And there's not much thing in the industry that can do this right now. And you see a big shift on how the sustainability industry look at mining. Like looking at it from a more holistic perspective, it actually can be a super efficient tool in this industry. So there's a lot of, I think, like driven by Bitcoin, there's a lot of perception change around the industry, and also specifically around proof of work. And I think that's very incredibly positive for the space, and for Alephium and for Cadena as well.
Yeah, and what's missed in all this is we only get so unfortunately, like in the US, we only get the negatives, right? If you don't know where to look, you're only going to hear the drawbacks of mining, right? And so I've been a long time miner. I've been mining since I could, right? And so many years, and I've seen different iterations. And what I've seen is, you've got countries that do like dirty mining, right? That just dirty coal, dirty whatever, like resources. So why not let countries that actually support green energy? And so like the mining facility that I'm at is 50% renewable energies now, and they're trying to get it up. There's limitations to everything, right? You can only go so far, but they're working towards fully sustainable operations. And so that wouldn't have happened otherwise. The power company, the electric company, wouldn't have saw 100,000 solar panels go up unless these companies were mining. And so every time, there's always like two sides to a story, right? And so I view, Bitcoin itself, I think, is a lot of that community. I love the community, but it's hive mind, right? It's Bitcoin or nothing. Bitcoin or nothing. There's plenty of other stuff. Yeah.
There's a reformed Bitcoin maximalist. I know a few, so they are, but definitely they are not the norm, I would say.
Okay. In my circles, most of them are realistic people. There's only a couple of them who would bite my head off for even talking about anything else. But they're you know what, they're winning right now. So let them have their joy. And honestly, as we see, hi Dory, as we see, Ethereum, right? That's my barometer for what's going to happen next is what Ethereum does next, right? And again, I'm actually when they went to POS, I actually stopped doing anything on that chain, and I know a lot of other developers who did the same. Some have gone back, right, because there's just activity there. But what they'll do for us, right, what they will do for us is once Bitcoin slows down a little bit, we're going to see Ethereum jump again, and then you're going to see all of these other altcoins jump. And so what's going to happen is you guys have apps, right? dApps, whatever you want to call them. Yeah. You have, I'm sure you have a strategy for onboarding new projects, new partners. I'm curious, let's talk about that a little bit. What is it that before you joined Alephium, like what was your favorite project? And then if you want to give a favorite project on Lithium, I'll let you do that. But if you don't want to, that's okay, because I understand it can create, tension. But I'm kind of curious, like what was it that kind of drew you in project-wise before you got here?
Yeah, should I say that I didn't really have one? So before working for Alephium, I'm very much an Alephium maximalist. So I never kind of traded too much in crypto. So my crypto journey, I used to work in a startup that was working on self-driving car, autonomous mobility kind of thing. And this is where I met actually a lot of the core contributor of Alephium. And after that, I moved to a small Swiss crypto exchange where I did so many things there, learned a lot. But this is how I learned about crypto. And at that time, just before it was in 2017, so kind of around December 2017. So if you were there, that was crazy with the crypto kitty. First time Bitcoin hitting 20,000, and the crypto kitty just killing Ethereum. That was the first time people starting to feel, scalability is actually a thing we should look into. And so then, I talked to a few people in the space. I put maybe $1,000 worth in various projects. I think at the time I had done IOTA was one because someone in the team, really liked the project. So I didn't have a lot of personal conviction, I would say. I remember that I had a bit of IOTA. I think I had a bit of Cardano back then. It was a different cycle, right? It's like 2 cycles.
Yes.
I had a bit of Cardano. I think I had Chainlink, kind of a few projects like this, but I kind of forgot about it. I worked at that exchange for a few years, and then a lot of people left, and I was doing a maternity leave replacement, and someone from that crypto exchange asked me about Alephium because they heard it was really before the mainnet launch. That was before the mainnet launch, and they heard in their network talking about Alephium, and they asked me about it because I used to work with the founder and a few of the core team member. And I was like, oh, if they heard about Alephium, they must be doing something. If that guy heard about LFM, they must be doing something interesting. So I went into the LFM Telegram group, which had, I think, like 40 people in it. So like very, very small, and spoke to Cheng, and, I joined. So it was really, and I had learned a lot about crypto working in this exchange. I learned a different side of the industry, and to a smaller scale. That was really, really small exchange. And then when I joined Aletheum here, I discovered like a completely different universe. And to be honest, this is a thing I love about crypto, is that there's so many sub-universe. I am so not versed into a lot of the crypto space. Like anything that is related to Aletheum or Aletheum adjacent, I build some knowledge. But outside of my Aletheum bubble, I don't have a lot of knowledge beyond that. So I don't have much recommendation on this. And I'm
That's
definitely
okay.
more of an Aletheum maxi. And I mean, honestly, on the Aletheum chain, there are so many amazing projects, so many amazing team, that the only way to be fair is that I would need to take the list and through all of them. But honestly, I think we've been really, really blessed with the people, just the mindset. And we had people tell us this at some of our meetups that came from different ecosystems. They were like, "Wow, you guys, small, of course, in scale, but the energy and the intent of the people in the space is something that I haven't seen in a while, even in more in ecosystem that are bigger with fancier bells and sparkles and stuff like. So I honestly think, and actually, we share some of our developer community, and I have to say, the community that we share between Cadena and Aletheum are some of the most amazing people that I have met, and I think this is something that we are extremely lucky to have. Again, there are some projects, some teams, some community that we share, and they are honestly great.
Yeah, and I always talk about, yeah, absolutely, and I always talk about. I get beat up over this, and it's like one of those things. It's just like the pessimist of people, right? They immediately go to the worst. Like they always assume the worst, and so I've always had a message of working together, right? You
Yeah.
don't get ahead by putting somebody else down. You get ahead by grabbing their hand and pulling them with you, right? And the reason you get ahead like that is because we all get to win then. And so I get beat up. I actually get beat up on this all the time on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it now. And what's interesting about that is it's not just about like one community versus the other. It's that hive mindset that gets people so much. And yes, there are. I'm fairly familiar with all the developers who build on Cadena and Aletheum. They work with Flux. I know a couple that work with Ergo, and so I do see like that parallel of keeping it within. I think the people who work on proof of work only want to work on proof of work. And again, it's not a negative to PO. It's absolutely not a negative to them. It's just there's something different about it. There's something more intimate about knowing how the mechanics work and that you can run a node and participate. I don't have to go put down 300 grand to operate a node, right? That's out of my it's not out of my reach, but it's out of my reach for practical reasons, right? And so, the interesting thing about it is as we go forward, right? And I appreciate the answer. I can't name a specific project either because everybody on here will yell at me because I didn't mention their project. And so I agree. There's a lot of cool ones. I actually I see a lot with the AN actually, in not like not like picking favorites or anything, but like if I were to pick a project that people outside of Alephium would know, I feel like they've got the most like in your face coverage. And I may be wrong on that, but like I feel like that's like the momentum gainer for the chain. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, Ayin was the first DEX, so
Mm-hmm.
and the first step on Aletheum. So obviously, I mean, and obviously they are doing amazing things as well. I think they have strong contender. Like recently, another DEX
Mm-hmm.
launched as well that is giving them a
Mm-hmm.
run for their money, as so to speak. But I think it's good, and I want to go back to your point about. I think it's important to not stay in your bubble because again, if you need to bring perspective. If you just talk about, if you stay in your echo chamber, at some point you're going to stagnate. It's important to bring external perspective. And I like what you said about bringing each other up. Like we have to take inspiration from each other. We have to respect the efforts into driving the industry forward that every chain is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if it's not the choices that you would have made, it is
Mhm.
super helpful to see what others are trying to do, even if it's just to say, okay, that's not something I want to do. That saves you the time to actually try it. And I think people should be a bit more respectful of what each other are doing, because there's value in it, even if it's not something that you would personally do or personally pursue. And again, it's so important to keep bringing external perspective into what you do, so you don't get stuck in a loop and just stagnate. And yes, there's so many projects into coming into LFM. And yeah, I'm glad that you heard about Ayin. They will be really happy to hear that. But there's right now there's 2 more decks. Alexium, which is the one that is it actually has surpassed Ayin, I think, in TVL. But Ayin has a few things under the arm coming up. But it's good. Like, if it's done in a respectful manner, like, competition drives innovation, drives, and it's very important, to again engage with different perspective and be a little bit challenged, right? There's also, yes, what people are mentioning swap, and they are also, I will say it in French, I'm sorry, because there's some words, it's so difficult for me to say them in English. There's another team called Invariant that were actually the first one to build concentrated liquidity, but they are currently on LFM, but they're currently on testnet. It's also a fantastic team, so really cool.
Yeah. No, that's good. And like I said, we don't pick favorites. I one of my favorite people in Web3 joined, and that's Floor. It's interesting. So he can swear like a sailor, and I love the guy. I love the guy. I don't care
He's
what.
never swore at me, so I didn't see
No,
this side. I only had the very kind. So
he's nice. Yeah.
So I haven't had that experience yet, but I'm happy with my version of him.
No, he's like that, right? So he's a phenomenal resource. He's a phenomenal person, and what's interesting is, so that's one of the people who is a contributor to multiple chains, right? And the team is just continuing to build, and so I think, like, after this is what I talked to a couple people about. Like, I've had conversations with people on Aletheum that I would like to get some of the projects on here just to see what they're doing, and deep dive on what the dexes are doing, what the lending is doing, because we're doing the same stuff, right? We're doing the exact same thing. So let's share notes. Let's see what's working. Let's see what's not. We're different than these other chains. So let's collaborate on these things. And I think that's a win to me.
Yeah, and I mean, we were talking about Flor from Links Lab, right? Floris, and Links Lab is one of the project I want to say that has the ethic I admire the most. I think their commitment, for example, to the Cadena community and the Cadena ecosystem, it's really something that stood out for me when I met them. And I think, again, this is what I meant about this is truly something so valuable to have in an ecosystem. People who have such a strong ethic and sense of commitment to community. The fact that they are insanely talented builder is also nice to have, of course.
Yes.
I think in an industry where you always have new project, new chain, offering I don't know how much amount of money in grants, and it's so easy to hop from one place to the other. Having people who have that that kind of have this commitment and this ethic is so precious in an ecosystem. So super grateful to have them here.
Yeah, and so when you're looking for maybe not even developers and projects, when you're looking for what makes sense, what are our needs for the ecosystem, and looking at partners, what is it that you guys put an emphasis on when evaluating a partnership, and is there more coming down the line to kind of fill gaps? You don't have to name any specifically. I'm just more fishing, like, what's the strategy there, and where are you guys going to take that long term?
I mean, so just in terms of the partnership, we try partnership, and part of it was not a partnership, but we try to think about what is important to sustain the ecosystem in the beginning. So this one was not a partnership. But it kind of falls in the category of the future one I will mention. But for example, one thing that for us was very key to have very early on was having bridges, so that we could bring stablecoin into our ecosystem, because stablecoin are the food of DeFi in a lot of cases,
Yes.
especially in early ecosystem. So, but that's part of the thought, is like, what does the ecosystem need to, what are the foundational services that the ecosystem needs to thrive? And some people might have disagree with the priority, right? We always try to prioritize what we feel is the best, but we can always opinions varies, and sometimes like this. We've worked a lot recently on hardware wallets, because as Alephium grew a little bit bigger, it became a more pressing concern for people to have a hardware storage solution, for example. And when it comes to more project and developers, I mean, honestly, I think it's kind of the same. You need different type of project that speak to different people. You need different type of builders as well, because sometimes you will have a project that have the most excellent builders, but they don't have a strong business acumen. So they will build, they will build amazing solution, amazing project and apps, but they might not reach the adoption that they could have in the ecosystem, because those are two very different skills. But I think it's important to see value in those different type of builder, type of project, and try to leverage each one of them in the most beneficial way for them, for the project themselves, but also for the ecosystem. So we try to find, honestly, there's not like a winning formula. It's trying to encourage everyone and to find the best way to do this depending on the type of profile, because you have project that will generate a lot of happiness, but maybe not a lot of happiness, like enthusiasm is a better word, right? Enthusiasm in the ecosystem, but might not lead to lasting adoption. You have project that maybe won't do too well in our ecosystem, but actually could bring you external communities to start looking in the project. So it's a little bit on a case-by-case basis, but ultimately the driving principle is trying to welcome everyone and finding the most beneficial way depending on the type of project that comes to you. But people stop writing compliments about me in the chat.
It's a nice break from them trolling the heck out of us. So it's kind of a nice break. You get the benefit of a nice break there. So no, this is good. And so when I was posting about this, I was like, oh, you could class this up a little bit for us, not knowing that I would be even in a sweatshirt today. Normally I've got my don't blame the network shirt. Yeah, exactly. I like funny stuff like that. And so if you don't have fun, you don't ruin it. If you're not having fun, what are you doing in Web3, right? I feel like it's almost like the Wild West, where you got rules, but you kind of can like go out there a little bit and explore, right? You can kind of explore. And so what is it, where Alephium is today? Like, what are you looking at exploring tomorrow? Like where you're at, and what kind of new stuff is coming on the pipeline from the network, from projects coming on, and maybe not a specific project, but I mean that's a very vague. You could probably talk like for a couple minutes. We got about 10 minutes, so I'll let you take that, and you can work in anything you want in the next 10 minutes, and cut me off and promote whatever you want here. We're all ears. You've got an audience, so go for it.
Thank you. No, but I don't want to take too much, but I think what I'm really, I don't know if I don't know if I would say I have fun. I feel like I have a lot of pressure, but I have, let's say, I don't know if fun is the right word, because I feel like there's a little bit too much pressure to consider it like fun, but definitely happy. Like, it's a happy space to be in, even if there's days where it feels less happy. Like, I feel like it's such a challenging and space where you learn so much and you grow so much and you connect with so many people, and that is happy and that is fun to some extent. In that sense. And what I'm the most looking forward to, honestly, like we touched on in the beginning, and that's true also on Cadena, right, is I think like when we enter the, you will see where I want to go with this. When we enter the ASIC era for Alephium, I discovered an entire new world of mining, because it's so different from the GPU mining scene, right? And I find out how disconnected, let's say, the broader mining community was in some cases to DeFi smart contract and things like this. And like it's like there's a wall, between those two worlds. And I think again,
Hmm.
so few chains that actually are connecting both of those worlds into one ecosystem. I am very, very much looking forward to see how those things can be combined together to offer new use cases and new use cases, new services, new options for people that they haven't seen yet because that hasn't been explored enough. And so I think that that's kind of what I'm quite excited about, to see what people do that hasn't been done before, because that's what would excite me the most. I would say right now.
So you got a special treat. So one of my favorite people and accounts that I follow on X joined, which is Historic Vids. I don't want to call him out, but like he puts like just interesting stuff, like just very interesting stuff. And he's been talking about crypto lately. And I think he's like 5+ million followers now. So like it's cool seeing these people come on, and so you kind of can get like an idea of and this is good for you. These are like real people who run blockchains, right? Co-founders. I don't call it high up people, but like people who are important to the success of these chains, at least early on, until it kind of grows into its own thing. But we still see Vitalik on Ethereum, right? He's still he can have his weird days where he's doing just the weirdest things, but the guy is just like living his best life, right? And
Yeah.
I see a lot of that energy within Alephium, and so the builder experience, right? I've seen these builder meetups and things like that. And how have you guys kind of taken that to include builders in the process? How have you treated these builder get-togethers? And what kind of access do the builders have to the core team, the founder, if they need to get something done quickly?
I mean, I think this is something that people appreciate a lot about Alephium, and I don't know how sustainable it is in its current format, at a different scale, but I think on Discord, it's super active. Like if you ask a question in the past, basically the core dev would respond to you. Now it's 50-50 because we are starting to have developers that are becoming so experienced into Alephium and Half and the virtual machine that, now it's 50-50. But again, because we've taken this approach of, I will say like this, like kind of starting small and evolving with use cases, developer feedback is essential in the way Alephium will be built. And not just developers, we started Alephium with a block time of 60, it had a block time of 64 seconds.
Mhm.
And because the founder and the core contributor, they have a good understanding of, block time versus
Mhm.
finality versus what TP was it TPS? Yes, I think the third one is
Mhm.
TPS. People kind of confuse all of those things together, like the block time, TPS, finality. That they had underestimated the impact of the block time in the user
Mhm.
experience, and that was a feedback that they got a lot. And so block time reduction became a much higher priority than it was. Let's say originally it was just our input. So whether it is builder or eventually users, it's definitely one of the key driver, at least in the prioritization of what gets included into Alephium. And I mean, you can, if you go on our Discord, you'll see every day a developer providing a feedback and input. And
Mhm.
depending on, the complexity of making the adjustment, it can be done very quickly. I think in our first hackathon that we did a year ago, I don't know, I think they made like 10, 15 updates to the SDK or a few things
Mhm.
to make it easier for people. The meetup, we only did one so far. Um, we only did one so far, and I loved it. I I know people have been asking when is the next one. It's like when I have time to start
Yeah, when
organizing
I
it.
got time, they're a lot of work. People
When
don't
I have
understand they're a lot of work.
doing all of my to-do list to sit down and kind of organize it. But I loved it because it was relatively small scale. I think if you look at the industry scale, right, we were around 65 to 70 with and the core team we were around 10 or 11. So, and then you had a few sponsors and things like this, but we had around 50 to 55 builders, and we did this over 2 days and 2 days, and it was a little bit short, but just enough that people really had time to talk to each other pretty much. And I feel like keeping like a human dimension in this space is so important. I mean, it's important everywhere, but in crypto, where we all speak through computers and always like digitally, having a little bit of human touch and human approach and a bit of emotional intelligence, is sometimes needed. And I think that's kind of, I wouldn't say the strategy, because I think this is genuinely who we are, or who we thrive to be, but this is definitely a guiding principle, is to keep kind of this human interaction and this availability to interact with people, because in the end Aletheum is, as every layer one, we are building for builders. So it's so important. Like if in the traditional world, or clients would be the builders that build on Aletheum. In crypto, it's a little bit skewed, because obviously
Yes.
not how it is
It's
right
crazy.
now. Far less. We're not there yet. But if you take a step back and you look, builders are your customer, or the people you're, again, understand it's not 100% like this in crypto. So involving them in every step of the process is crucial in the end. In the same way, customer feedback should be at the utmost importance for any business or any company, any project, in like this.
Absolutely. No, and we have about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. And what you're
Cool.
going to do is you're going to do your 2 minute. You're going to get a 2 minute elevator pitch for why people should come in to the Aletheum ecosystem. It's up to you if you want to talk about why they should buy it, but feel free to just you go out there and strut your stuff.
I mean, have been doing it recently in a way I don't think I can do here, because you invited me, and it wouldn't be fair to do it the way I've been doing it the past couple of weeks. So I'm going to say, that Aletheum is one of the most adopted proof of work chain when it comes to smart contract and decentralized application. It has a number of innovation, that you have a vibrant ecosystem. I think the arrival of the bridge, we had the bridge with Ethereum, bridge with BSC just came in to really bring visibility to other community. We have a thriving ecosystem of dApp. For example, I think our DEX offers some of the most interesting APR that you can see in the space right now. Partially because we're still quite early and quite small. Obviously, it changes as you get more people, but there's a lot of opportunity in the ecosystem. And when you get to be part of something first, depending on what you're looking for, I think it's a truly life-changing experience to be part of a growing ecosystem and being able to impact the way it grows. Aletheum has a lot of cool tech, cool people, cool communities. So I hope that you check us out.
Yeah, and I can say the part you can't. So when you look at the price of an asset, right? And yeah, exactly. I got you. When you look at the price of an asset, where it starts and where it's at, look at comparisons to other chains, and they wave, and then they go crazy at some point. I haven't seen the crazy yet. So if you're looking for again, diversification is so important, right? And I'm not giving financial advice because I don't know shit from shit. But the thing is, if you are looking for projects and you want accessible teams and you want happy, vibrant communities, it's worth checking out, right? And so for me, I diversify my investments. I invest in what I feel is going to do well. I don't share what they are because I don't want people buying stuff I put out. But that's the thing is, if you look at, you said it right, the DeFi, stop it, no price talk. We're not talking price. The DeFi yields are crazy. So check them out. Check out the projects that are running. Follow Mod. Follow Aletheum. Learn more. Ask questions.
Follow me, but my Twitter account is definitely not an opinionated one. They had this AI stuff where you could ask him to roast your Twitter account, and I was just a bot reposting Aletheum content. So, if you want to follow a more interesting account, you can follow Aletheum. You can of course follow me, but you won't find it I try to be pretty neutral on Twitter, because I don't have the emotional energy to deal with the Twitter crowd. So I'm very much Aletheum centric, very much. But you should definitely follow Amir, though. Much more
thank you.
Twitter account to look at than mine.
I'll never get another normal job if they ever look at my Twitter. I'll tell you that right now, and that's okay. That's part of, like, if you're going to be on my side of the fence in Web3, you have to have a little. You have to let your hair down a little bit. If you're going to be on the business side, you have to be a little more reserved. And I think you need all of those things, and that's the sum of our parts, and that's why it works so well. So I'm happy that you joined. This has been phenomenal. I enjoy these more intimate conversations where we can just kind of free talk. And as Maud said, there was no questions shared. The whole thing for me is to learn more about what people are doing, learn more about themselves. So check out the projects. We'll be back again next week at 1 p.m. for on Thursday for LFG Thursday. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This has been a lot of fun. Hope everybody has a good day.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Anytime.